There is a line in baseball. Every player knows where it is. Every manager knows where it is. Every umpire, every broadcaster, every person who has watched this game long enough to understand its unwritten architecture knows exactly where that line sits. It is not written in any rulebook. It does not appear in any official document distributed at the start of spring training. But it is real. It has always been real. And the entire sport operates on the shared understanding that certain things stay on one side of it. William Contreras crossed it in the 7th inning. And what happened next stunned an entire nation. The game had been close from the first pitch. The kind of close that makes a stadium breathe differently. The kind of close where every at-bat carries a weight that mid-season games are not supposed to carry. The Dodgers and the Brewers had been trading momentum since the opening inning, a lead that shifted, a deficit that got erased, a pitching change that altered the entire texture of the night. Shohei Ohtani had been at the center of it. He is always at the center of it. He had worked 2 walks already. He had fouled off 7 pitches in one at-bat alone, the kind of at-bat that drains a pitcher quietly, that costs an arm something it won't fully get back until the following morning. He had driven in 1 run with a line drive that split the gap in the 5th inning and sent the stadium into the kind of noise that builds slowly before it breaks all at once. By the time the 7th inning arrived, the score was tied. Everything that had happened before it suddenly felt like a prologue. Ohtani led off the 7th. He stepped into the batter's box with that particular stillness he carries everywhere on a baseball field. The pitcher on the mound was working carefully, too carefully, the kind of careful that telegraphs fear more than strategy. The count ran full. 6 pitches. 7. The crowd was on its feet before the 8th pitch had even been released. The 8th pitch was inside. Not inside the way pitchers work inside to establish the plate. Inside in a different way. Inside in the way that has a meaning separate from baseball. Inside in the way that umpires watch for and historians remember. It hit Ohtani on the left forearm. He did not react immediately. That is the thing about Ohtani that people who have watched him closely understand: he does not perform pain. He does not exaggerate. He stood at the plate for a moment, the ball rolling away into the dirt, and he simply looked at the pitcher. Not with rage. Not with theatrics. With something quieter and more dangerous than either of those things. He began walking to first base. And that is when William Contreras said something. Nobody in the broadcast booth caught it cleanly. The cameras caught the moment, caught the way Ohtani's stride slowed, caught the way his head turned, caught the precise instant when whatever Contreras said reached him from behind the plate. The lip readers would work on the footage for hours afterward. The commentators would speculate carefully. The league office would review every available angle before releasing any official statement. But the players on the field didn't need a lip reader. They heard it. And the Dodgers dugout, which had been watching Ohtani take a baseball to the forearm with the collective tension of a team that understands exactly what losing that player would mean, went from tense to something else entirely in the span of about 2 seconds. Ohtani stopped walking. He turned around fully. And the look on his face, the look that cameras captured from 3 different angles, the look that would be replayed on every sports broadcast in the country before midnight, the look that would become the image attached to every article written about this night, was not the look of a baseball player who had been hit by a pitch and exchanged words with a catcher. It was the look of a man who had been pushed past something. The benches cleared in 8 seconds. That is how long it took from the moment Ohtani turned around to the moment both dugouts had emptied completely onto the field. 8 seconds. Which is fast even by the standards of bench-clearing incidents. Which tells you something about what the players on both sides had been feeling for the previous 6 innings that they had not yet found a way to express. The Dodgers came out of their dugout with a particular kind of energy. Not chaotic. Not random. Directed. The way energy moves when it has been compressed for a long time and finally finds the opening it has been waiting for. Contreras did not back down immediately. That was the part that escalated everything. That was the part that turned what might have been a brief confrontation into something that required 6 umpires, 3 coaches from each side, and approximately 4 minutes of sustained physical separation before the field began to return to something resembling order. Players were held. Words were exchanged that no microphone captured cleanly enough to broadcast. Managers were out on the field within seconds, Dave Roberts moving with the controlled urgency of a man who needs to protect his best player and manage a situation simultaneously, which is an almost impossible combination of tasks to perform at the same time. Through all of it, Ohtani stood at the outer edge of the cluster. Not at the center. Not throwing punches. Not screaming. But present in a way that was impossible to ignore, his size, his stillness, his controlled fury radiating outward like heat from something that had been burning quietly for too long. The ejections came quickly. Contreras was gone. 2 Brewers players who had pushed their way to the front of the confrontation were gone with him. On the Dodgers side, 1 player was ejected for what the umpires described as aggressive escalation, a description that told its own story about how close the situation had come to something much worse. The stadium did not settle easily after that. It stayed loud in the particular way that stadiums stay loud when something has happened that the crowd cannot fully process yet. When the emotion of the moment is still too close to examine clearly. When people are still deciding how they feel about what they just watched. The game resumed. Baseball always resumes. But the game that resumed in the 8th inning was not the same game that had existed before the 7th. The air inside the stadium had changed. The body language of both teams had changed. And Shohei Ohtani, standing on first base after the field had finally cleared, looked out toward the pitcher's mound with an expression that made it very clear he was not finished competing. He never is. Dave Roberts stood in front of the microphone afterward with the look of a man carrying several things at once. The Dodgers had held on. They had won by 1 run, a lead that had been manufactured in the 8th inning by a team playing with something extra in their legs and their lungs, the kind of extra that gets added when a moment of ugliness gets converted into fuel. Roberts knew what that fuel had cost. He also knew what it had produced. A reporter asked him about the 7th inning. About Contreras. About what had been said. Roberts was quiet for a moment. "I'm not going to repeat what was said," he answered. "I don't think that serves anyone. What I will say is that our guys heard it. And they responded the way I would expect them to respond when one of their own is disrespected." He paused. Shohei handled himself. He always handles himself. But there are things that happen on a baseball field that go beyond the game. And what happened out there tonight went beyond the game. Another reporter pressed him, "Was Ohtani okay? Physically, emotionally, both?" Roberts almost smiled. "Almost. Shohei Ohtani is the last person on this planet you need to worry about being okay," he said. "What you saw tonight, what everybody saw tonight, was not something that broke him. It was something that reminded him why he plays the way he plays. Why he prepares the way he prepares." He let that sit for a second. "He's fine. More than fine." The room absorbed that. Somewhere in the Brewers' press conference, a different kind of silence was settling. Their manager spoke carefully. He did not defend what Contreras had said. He did not attempt to reframe the incident as something smaller than it was. He spoke the way managers speak when they know the league office is listening and the footage has already been watched by more people than they can count. "It should not have happened," he said simply. "That's all I'm going to say about it." The league's statement came before midnight. Contreras was suspended. The length was not symbolic. The language in the official statement was direct in a way that league statements are not always direct, referencing the specific nature of what had been said, referencing the standard of conduct expected from every player in every situation, referencing the footage that had been reviewed from multiple angles before any decision had been made. The nation had already made its own decision hours before that. There is a line in baseball. William Contreras crossed it in the 7th inning of a tied game in front of a stadium full of people and every camera angle that modern baseball provides. He crossed it in the direction of the one player in the sport that the entire country was watching most closely. He crossed it and discovered, the way people always discover when they cross that line, that the consequences arrive faster than expected. Shohei Ohtani stood on first base when the field finally cleared. He looked out at the pitcher's mound. And then he went back to work. Because that is who he is. That is what he does. That is the thing about Ohtani that no incident, no brawl, no 7th inning ugliness can touch or diminish or reduce. He competes. He absorbs. He returns. And William Contreras, suspended and watching from somewhere outside the white lines, will have a very long time to think about what happens when you push him past his limit.